Renegotiating the $40 million soccer field house is a big deal. That's just something that our city just cannot afford at this time. I believe that primarily what our city's been residents have been looking for is actually building a pool. There is a rumor that it would cost millions to renegotiate our deal with the recreation center, and that's simply not true. It will take a little work and some replanning for sure, but I know how to get this done as I've faced this situation in the past and with other various projects. My plan is to build a $7 million soccer field house at the CRCA Rec Center site, which would then allow us plenty of money to afford to build an affordable pool. The land at the CRCA is 28 acres. The land that over by where they were planning the new field house in Chelsea is only 13 acres. So it doesn't take into account for any kind of expansion that we might find in the future for us. I'm excited to be introducing new technologies to build in some of these new buildings and amenities. Instead of Chestermere being behind all of the communities around us, we can begin to be some of the leaders.
Can you tell me what you mean by a affordable pool, or what are some of that technology that you're referencing? How would that work for the citizens?
One thing when we're looking at affordability, we look at two things. So we look at construction costs, number one, which is how can we look at making the actual building process itself less expensive. And often what happens is that communities approach contractors and they end up getting a very expensive building. And one of the things that I want to try and bring to the table is that we can look at building it more with less expensive commercial products, like for example, standard warehouse trussing. That allows us to be quite a bit less expensive when we're using 2-foot warefoot trussing, 2-foot high warehouse trussing, rather than like for example 10-foot high warehouse trussing. The difference in cost is just massive, and so we want to design the facilities to be functional and to be attractive, but we want to try and make them as less expensive as possible, still at a commercial grade though.
Can you tell me how you can affordably build and maintain a pool?
So when we're looking at the actual operation costs, I did some work years ago with geothermal, and geothermal works best when it's in large applications. And
what is geothermal?
Geothermal is where we're actually using the general temperature underneath the soil, and that level allows us to pull that out and take advantage of that for heating large buildings or large bodies of water. In actuality, in my discussions with the geothermal experts, they were indicating that if we have a hockey rink beside us, that they have newer technology that would allow us to benefit significantly from that, because the hockey arena cooling creates a lot of heat, and that heating would be allowed to recycle that into the pool actually for additional heating. So it's quite an exciting concept, but all of these things would be proven first, proven the feasibility of it, and then bring that to Chestermere residents for them to all see, and then consider going forward with our council agreeing, of course.
Right, which speaks to, okay, so then can you talk about that idea of the recycling of weeds and the energy that would produce, and how would we be so forward in that?
That's more talking about a company with EcoGrowth. EcoGrowth had approached the city about a year ago about providing some of their furnaces for heating, and the city didn't have an application for it at that time, and so they turned them down. And what's interesting about part of their application is they can burn recyclables, and then they can also burn waste, or food waste, or weed waste. Now we have a lot of weeds. So by using all of those weeds, or some of those weeds, they've indicated that they believe we could heat the pool facility for the entire year just on the weeds we have alone.
From the lake?
The weeds from the lake, yes. And so that would be exciting to actually use those weeds for something rather than nothing. Now, having said that, I did want to use that technology as a backup to our geothermal. They're willing to bring that into the table at a reduced price, possibly for free, as long as we are looking at if it works, to then look at it for different buildings that we would do in Chestermere, which if it works, that makes a lot of sense.
That's really, really exciting and would make Chestermere very progressive.
It would. The geothermal side of things, you're basically looking at the cost of pumps circulating the water. So it's a lot different in the actual runnings of the operations monthly.
And what about the chemicals and staffing and those types of issues?
The chemicals, one of the things that I was proposing is rather than using chlorine, which is dangerous and expensive, instead of using that, is focusing more on salt and going to the nicer pools, which are salt pools. That's a less expensive product as well, and obviously much more safe. The staffing, there's not really a lot of change we can do there because it does cost. The amount of staff you need is for a safety thing. But one of the things it does do for our community is it brings a lot of employment to it, which again for youth, for adults, these are things that we should start focusing on for our communities.